it's really good to see so many of you here physically together. I've missed you.
We've missed you too.
But we are meeting together as the Scottish Greens, Scotland's arm of a much wider international green movement, which we've always been, movement to secure a future for us all, for people and for planet, but we are a movement for peace too. And so it is with incredible sadness that I'm speaking to this conference in the shocking, traumatic and frightening context of the events that we've witnessed, a brutal and unprovoked war of aggression in Europe and a humanitarian crisis on a scale like nothing we've seen for generations. It's a crisis which is already forcing the world to face some critical questions which could become pivotal moments in history. Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine was a flagrant and grievous breach of international law, and what we've seen happening since is truly horrific. We, of course, offer the people of Ukraine our support and our solidarity today, but it's vital that the people of Ukraine don't just hear that solidarity as words. They need to see it in action. And across Europe, Greens in government, working together with others, have acted swiftly to commit to unprecedented sanctions on Russia. We do so as part of the most concerted use of economic sanctions in history. So one question the world is asking of itself now is this: can this kind of concerted global use of economic sanctions be effective as a viable alternative to the kind of military engagement which would risk escalating the war? Can this work? Can a strong enough sanctions package achieve the strategic goal of de-escalation and restore security for Ukraine, for Europe, and perhaps even for the people of Russia who oppose this war despite knowing the brutality with which Putin suppresses dissent? Shortly, we're going to hear from Jean Lambert, who served as a Green MEP for 2 decades. Jean will talk to us about the solidarity that unites our movement in response to these tragic events, and having taken part in recent online meetings with the leaders and co-leaders of Green parties from across Europe, I know that solidarity is strong. From the recognition, from the coordination of the humanitarian response to prepare for refugees before the invasion even began. And yes, we have Green colleagues across Europe who were far better prepared for this than the woeful response of the UK Home Office. Through to the leadership that we've seen from Greens of the European debate on economic sanctions, and critically, the response on energy security. Indeed, one of the most decisive actions against Putin has been our friends in the German Greens putting a stop to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That was a very significant move by a Green party that had only recently re-entered government, because Vladimir Putin has spent years ensuring that Russian gas is a key element to his power play across Europe. Putin's ambitions are founded on this abusing the strategic value of fossil fuels. And so this is the next big question the world must ask of itself right now. We already know that fossil fuel dependence is a profound threat to our security, our ecological security, our geopolitical security, and our economic security in the face of volatile prices. But will we accept globally that this now must be a moment to rapidly accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels? It's not just the fossil fuel industry itself that's trying to prevent that. All of their political proxies, from the Net Zero Scrutiny Group to the Global Warming Foundation to Nigel Farage, want to lock in even more dependence on oil and gas from wherever they can get it, from the North Sea, from fracking, or from wherever else, instead of taxing the excess profits of the fossil fuel producers. And here in Scotland, the Tories and their cheerleaders are shamelessly using this scenario to try and justify expanding oil and gas exploration and production. For them, barely months after the COP left Glasgow, any excuse will do to ignore the climate science which should be keeping them awake at night. This extreme fossil fuel ideology would throw our future away. It would surrender the cost of living crisis to volatile global gas markets. And to follow this ideology would be to turn our backs on the workers and communities who urgently need a just transition and investment in the industries of the future. Colleagues, the horrific events in Ukraine will test the world's ability to resolve conflict with economic power instead of military power, but it will also test our willingness to treat our dependence on fossil fuels as the vulnerability that it is. Green parties have been making this case for decades. Now, across Europe, it is Greens in government who are showing the way and finding solutions that can make us safer from environmental collapse, from geopolitical threats, and from the volatility of energy costs that are hitting the most economically vulnerable the hardest. Now, here in Scotland, in government for the first time anywhere in the UK, the Scottish Greens are working for Scotland to do exactly that. Reducing reliance on fossil fuel is absolutely essential to creating a green recovery from the pandemic, one that tackles the climate emergency, in transport, in homes, workplaces, and community buildings, in how we produce, buy, and dispose of our products, in how we look after the natural world. Lorna and I, as ministers, and working closely with our Green colleagues, Maggie, Gillian, Ariane, Ross, and Mark, Greens in Parliament and now in government are making a difference. As Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, I recognise just how huge that particular challenge is on fuel poverty, cost of living pressures, but also the opportunity for tens of thousands of good green jobs. Conference, we need to insulate Scotland. Insulate Scotland against our Northern Hemisphere cold, but also against the blight of fuel poverty and against the reliance on turbulent fossil fuel markets, which bolster brutal regimes and destroy our planet. That's why my first major statement as Minister set a target of converting over 1 million homes to zero carbon heating systems in this decade, and why we're already seeing the first allocations of more than £1.8 billion of funding over this Parliament. More money has been put into the Fuel Insecurity Fund, focused on households at risk of deconnection or fuel debt. And that comes alongside schemes like the Winter Support Fund and from next winter, low-income winter heating assistance. These immediate responses are absolutely necessary, but in truth, our energy system needs to be transformed. As our movement has known for decades, the real answer to fuel poverty and in energy insecurity lies in more fundamental reform in how energy is provided and how our homes, workplaces and community buildings are heated and powered. That's why, as Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, I was clear that alongside immediate responses to the cost of living pressures, we needed longer-term action, reinforcing future resilience so that vulnerable households are not left at the mercy of the ebb and flow of global energy markets. So next year, a total of about £1/3 billion will go to tackling fuel poverty and energy efficiency in Scotland. Almost 120 million in two schemes alone, Warmer Home Scotland and our area-based schemes, tackling fuel poverty at a neighbourhood level. But we need to do more. That's why today I'm announcing 3 new steps to build that energy resilience that we so urgently need. First, I'll be expanding the funding to the Scottish Government's Home Energy Scotland programme run by the Energy Saving Trust, increasing capacity both face-to-face and online at this time of unprecedented demand. Secondly, I'll be bringing more people into the scope of the flagship Warmer Home Scotland scheme. More people will be eligible for that support to tackle fuel poverty by extending the number of older people who can benefit from this help. We'll also be looking at how we can make further changes to offer that support to other households living in poorer quality homes in the future. And thirdly, I'm increasing the grant limits on area-based fuel poverty schemes because costs have risen over the last 2 years of the pandemic and Brexit, and the scale of what we need to do increases year on year. The last 6 months have also seen the first ever joint green budget in the UK, and as the budget process concluded, the Scottish Government had to move quickly to address that growing cost of living crisis. As well as doubling the Scottish Child Payment, we've seen a £150 payment to all households in council tax bands A to D or receiving council tax reduction. Now, with the limits of devolution and the need to get support to people quickly, that wasn't ever going to be the perfect solution. We do need to spend time developing longer term solutions, but it was also vital to respond swiftly and simply, as swiftly and simply as possible in those immediate pressures. Our movement has always known that tackling the climate crisis and tackling fuel poverty go hand in hand. Building that greener future means leaving no one behind, and now we're bringing that approach to government. We've delivered free bus travel for young people, opening up opportunities for those young people themselves, but also helping family budgets. As we move away from reliance on the private car, our transformational uplift in funding for walking, wheeling and cycling will make a big difference too. And this Thursday in Parliament, I'll lead a debate on how that budget will deliver across Scotland. The fact is that for far too long, planning decisions have put the car first and foremost. They've been based on the assumption that everybody has one and everybody uses it every day. Now, that was never true, and many, many people were left behind. But it also locked a lot of other people who had a car but didn't want to rely on it all the time. It locked them into car dependence, made sustainable choices much too difficult. That attitude needs to change, and change permanently. The well-being of our citizens is at the heart of a green recovery, and that recovery starts in our communities. That's why the local elections this May are so vitally important. We've got Greens in national government leading this work. We need many more Greens elected to councils to carry this work on in communities. Make no mistake, the progress that we've seen in the city climate plans for Edinburgh and Glasgow has been down to the work of Scottish Green councillors. They've led the calls for improvement in public transport. They've saved local services like libraries and swimming pools. They've made a huge difference. And it's not just in those biggest cities. If you want to see the value of having Greens in the room, look at the amazing work of Ailsa Tolmash here in Stirling. Ailsa's been on the front line of opposing developers when they seek to destroy local natural assets. And as Minister for Active Travel, I'm really pleased that we've got a champion like Alistair here pushing for safe cycle routes. Look at the work of Pippa Hadley in the Highlands. Pippa ensured that Highland Council recognised and declared a climate emergency. And with Steve Sankey and Martin Ford in Orkney and Aberdeenshire, they've shown that just one councillor in a local authority can make a huge difference. Imagine what we can do with many more. More community facilities protected, safer travel, more green space. That means more green councillors delivering more action for Scotland. We've shown that having Greens in government, green councils can also make a difference. Now we need those councillors, many more of them, from Ayrshire to Angus, Falkirk to Fife, Dundee to Dumfries. Colleagues, let's do everything that we can over the next 8 weeks to make that a reality. Today, here in government and in our communities, we're building a sustainable, fairer and greener future together. We're working for Scotland and we're ready to do so much more. Thank you very much, Gordon.